I can't tell you over the course of my 48-year driving career how many trucks I've owned, but I can tell you that the last one I ordered in 2003 and the one that I've still got today has been a great truck and I'm glad I kept it. I remember when this truck ran out of warranty after about 4 years of owning it, and it was free and clear, and I had to make the decision on whether I was going to replace it with a new truck or whether I was just going to keep this old girl because it was running just fine at the time. And I really didn't want to sell it. But, if the market was reliable and viable, I would trade it for a new truck. I'd done it before. So I looked at the trucking market, and I did not like what I saw. The emissions engines were just starting to come in. The trucks were costing a whole lot more because of the emissions equipment, and the trucks were breaking down a lot. My biggest customer, being in the produce industry, was a great customer, but they needed absolute reliability on their freight deliveries from the independents that pulled for them. And with a new truck with emissions equipment, I couldn't guarantee them that absolute reliability. I also looked at my outbound customers, and I had load brokers chipping away at my outbound customers, and they were offering cheaper rates. And my outbound customers, because it wasn't time sensitive freight, they were more interested in doing it cheaper than the quality of the service. I knew sooner or later that I was going to lose that battle. So I hunkered down. I decided to keep my old truck, and it was one of the best moves I ever made. Keeping the older girl here saved me tens of thousands of dollars over the next following number of years. So I stuck with my older truck that was free and clear, hunkered down, started building a bigger maintenance account, and started to watch the truck as closely as I possibly could. I did very thorough circle checks, looking for any sort of a problem that might arise. The biggest concerns, of course, are the engine, the drivetrain, and the electrical system. So parts like the turbo, for instance, I would replace before they expired, because when a turbo blows when you're on the road, it can scatter fins and parts down into the engine, and then you're into a total rebuild. So you want to replace parts like the turbo before they fail. I never ever skipped or stretched out an oil change or a grease job. I kept meticulous maintenance records so I could track what I'd done, what I was going to need to do, and I worked consistently with Pete and the Cat dealership to be on top of these problems before they arose. And because we were ahead of the game on all of that, I very rarely ran into trouble on the road. I was able to replace stuff early before it broke, and it worked out really well for me. Today, this truck is retired with over 1,000,000 miles on it, but it could go to work tomorrow. And if I were to put it back to work, I'd run the shorter stuff because, frankly, the long haul rates just don't pay what they should anymore. I've been to California plenty of times already. I don't need to see that anymore, so I don't have to worry about the truck not having emissions equipment. And quite frankly, with the soaring fuel costs today, I would try to keep my miles to an absolute minimum to reduce my fuel costs. I don't think there's any doubt that there's a recession coming in the trucking industry. So, do you want to make huge truck payments on top of huge fuel payments in a market that's iffy? If there is a recession that's coming, and I think there is, I think you're better off positioned if you want to own a truck, or if you have to own a truck, to have an older truck that you can fix easily because it doesn't have a whole lot of issues to deal with the emissions equipment. And when times get really tough, you can park it against the fence. You don't need to work that truck. You don't need to make payments on it because you own it free and clear. And you can work it when you want to work it, and when the market isn't right, you don't have to work it. It never ceases to amaze me these days that you can pay over $200,000 for a truck, and because of the emissions equipment, the thing isn't reliable. In trucking, reliability is everything. Let me tell you a story about my old friend Simon now, because when I think of new technology, I think of Simon. Simon was an old guy that taught me how to drive, and he was great, but he was pretty fixed in his ways. He didn't trust new technology. And in the early 70s, when CB radios first became popular, I rushed out and bought one. They were only $25 for a new CB back then, because if you were trucking and all you got back then was AM radio stations, you'd lose them 50 miles out of town and there'd be nothing. So I thought, oh man, it'd be great to talk to other truck drivers. So I ran out and bought a CB radio, $25, brand new one, couldn't go wrong. I talked to Simon. I said, Simon, you've got to get one of these CB radios so you and I can chat while we're going down the road together. And he looked me square in the eye. He says, I find that my truck makes just as much money without the CB radio. And it was his way of telling me that he didn't want to spend the $25 on this technology because it was money out the window. It was wasted money. Now, years later, he actually ended up buying a CB, but even then he wouldn't talk on it. He'd just turn it up and listen to it, but he'd never say a word. Just a funny story from my past about an old guy that I really miss to this day. Stay safe, keep the rubber side down. Just because the technology is new doesn't mean the technology is reliable. Take care. I'll see you on the backhaul.